Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 37. Today in the show, Dan and I are going to be looking back at 2014 and discussing our lessons learned, greatest moments, and much, much more. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. And as I mentioned, today on the show, we're reflecting back on the past year. It's December 30th today, 2014, so it just naturally seems like the right time to look back at the past 12 months and then maybe do some thinking about the new season to come too. But before we do all that, Dan, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm wearing sweatpants.
Thank you for that image.
Well, I'm just saying, anytime I'm in sweatpants, I feel comfortable and I feel good.
Well, that is good.
I don't know. So there's that.
I'm glad to hear it. How was the day at work?
Day at work was good. Not too bad. They pulled me into the office, and in February, they want me to go to the Philippines for work.
Wow. So you're there forever.
For 2 weeks to 4 weeks.
Wow, that's pretty substantial.
Yeah. So I had to come home and talk to my wife about it, and I don't know. My wife in February is going to be March. So like 7 months pregnant, and then I got a 2-year-old at home. So we'll see. I'm leaning towards I don't want to go.
Yeah, I feel like you didn't mention one of the most important things, too. I mean, February, we're talking about the beginning of shed hunting season there.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's something that should probably keep you home, Dan.
Right. And I don't think they have shed antlers in the Philippines.
No, something tells me they probably don't. At least not as big as they do in Iowa.
Right. And if they do, they'd probably grind them up and use them as medicine. But that's probably just a stereotype.
That could be.
Yeah.
You know, interesting thing, though. People over somewhere on the other side of the world, they use an extract of deer antler velvet for some medicinal purposes, kind of like a growth hormone type deal.
Right.
Have you heard about that before?
I have. Ray Lewis,
yes,
the football player who got away with murder, that guy. He used it I don't know because I don't think it's illegal if you're eating deer, because that tissue is the fastest growing living substance in nature. So its duplication rate is very high, and that's why, people are trying to use it to make them bigger, faster, stronger type of thing.
Yeah. Pretty interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't think I would eat antler velvet, though, just to get bigger, faster, stronger. Just me. I don't think I would do it, but hey.
Yeah.
Was that your trick in college, Dan?
No. My trick in college to get I got bigger. I didn't get faster or stronger, but was a lot of Busch Light.
I thought that might be where you're going with this.
They sold them in 30 packs, believe it or not.
What an interesting concept.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man. Well, glad you're having a decent day in your sweatpants. Interestingly enough, I'm in sweatpants too. So,
yes.
How about that?
Awesome. Tell me a little bit about your day, Mark.
I'll tell you what, I am freezing cold, and I can't feel my toes, and my face is really red, and I've got snot running on my nose. So,
that's right. You were in the timber.
Yeah, I literally got in from the woods just about 5 minutes ago. So I want to tell all the listeners, I'm going to give a synopsis of our telephone call last night. Oh, yeah?
Long story short, Mark says to me, I have to hunt in the evenings and I have to hunt in the mornings because my wife is making me. So I have never, ever had that happen where it's like, you have to go hunting tonight. if my wife ever said that, I'd have to put one of my trail cameras in the house because I know that she'd probably be getting a visitor.
Yeah, that might be suspicious, huh?
How do I get my husband out of the house? Well, tell him he should go hunting.
Maybe I should be a little concerned.
You should, Mark. You should.
Oh man, no, my wife she is a little irritated with me because I have not fulfilled my husbandly duties of putting enough venison in the freezer. My typically what I end up doing every year is I hold off on shooting does on my best properties here in Michigan because I'm still trying to shoot a buck and I don't want to, risk shooting a deer and have to track it all over the property all day or something like that. So I always end up waiting till towards the end of the season. And so my wife was giving me a hard time this year because the past 2 years I waited until New Year's Eve to kill a couple does. And so she's like, this year, don't wait till the last minute. Start shooting does earlier because we always like to have at least 3 deer in the freezer to get us through the full year. Well, one thing or another has happened. I don't know if I told you all this stuff, Dan, or not, but I started trying to shoot does about 2 weeks ago. I had an issue with my gun 2 weeks ago where the hammer wouldn't lock back. This was the muzzleloader. The hammer wouldn't lock back, and so couldn't get a shot of the doe. Then I had my dad down. That's a whole other story I haven't told you about either. I think about my dad's trip down to visit us. I'll probably mention that actually a little bit later in this show. But I had my dad down for the weekend, so I was hunting with him, so I wasn't shooting any deer. So that weekend went by, and then I went out a couple more times and didn't have a shot. And then 2 nights ago, I had a shot at a doe, and it misfired, and then the deer cleared the field. And then about 20 minutes later, another group of does comes out. This time, the hammer won't lock back again. So I finally crank it back. It clicks. But all right, here we go. I go and pull the trigger, and the hammer won't go forward. The trigger won't pull. So I'm like, oh my gosh. So now I'm thinking the hammer didn't lock all the way back. So I start moving my thumb towards the hammer to try to click it back the rest of the way. And as it brushes up against the hammer, it goes forward. The gun goes off, and that was just a debacle because then after that point I didn't know if I hit the deer or not. A bunch of cloud of smoke and the deer went running, and I just saw a bunch of does running every different direction and didn't look like there was one that was hit. So me and a friend searched and we could never find any blood or anything like that. So that was 2 nights ago. And then last night I had a friend of ours had expressed interest to me a few months back that he'd always wanted to go hunting, but he'd never had a chance to do that before, and so I offered to take him out. So last night was the night that we had originally agreed upon to do that, so I took him out hunting last night. So again, I didn't have a chance at a doe. So now we're here today. It's the second to last day of the season. I still don't have any does in the ground. So I was going to go out this morning. So I wake up early in the morning and get my stuff ready, and I check my gun. And I had messed around with the gun all day yesterday, cleaning it and checking it, and I'd gotten that hammer to lock back again. It was working. So this morning, again, I tested it to make sure it was still working, and it won't lock back again. So I'm like, oh, I was so frustrated. So I was like, forget this. I'm just going to the gunsmith. So I packed up all my stuff as soon as the local sporting goods store was open. I brought my gun into them and said, hey, I'm having these issues. This thing continuously is not locking back. And they basically said that it's just there's rust that's deeper, and not in the areas that you can easily clean that I'm cleaning when I usually clean my muzzleloader, but deeper in like the trigger mechanism and some stuff that is causing this thing to hang up. So they said the best you can do is just spray a bunch of kind of grease or some kind of lubricant there, and that worked to get it working again for now. But in the long run, I might need to, I don't know, either send the whole gun in, he said, actually, and see if they'll replace the parts in there, which is a pain in the butt. But that got me tonight, and went out tonight, and it was cold, 7-degree wind chill. And I saw 9 does, but just out of range. Nothing within my comfortable range at this point. So now here I am, 1 day left of the hunting season here in Michigan, and I don't have any does on the ground. I've got a half-full freezer and an unhappy wife.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, better get on it, or she's going to find someone else who can provide, my friend.
I know it. So now I'm not looking forward to it, but I think I got to get up early tomorrow morning and head out there in the freezing cold. So he'll be all right. It's good to get out in the woods, but it's the end of the year. I'm a little tired, a little cold, a little. I don't know how you are, Dan, but sometimes I mean, you know it, I absolutely love hunting. But when you get to end of December, January, I'm kind of ready for a little break. So I think I'm ready for that break.
I, on the other hand, am not ready for a break. This weekend, I'm heading out for probably Saturday night and Sunday night hunt. I'll probably hunt Sunday morning as well. So Saturday night, Sunday morning, and Sunday night, and then after the hunt, I'll head back home. But and then I don't know if I'm going to be going to the ATA show or not. And if I don't, I'll be in a tree for Friday night and Saturday night the next week, because next Saturday is the last day of the Iowa season. So only a couple more chances out to get out in the timber, and I'm going to try to take advantage of every one of them.
Now, have you been out hunting at all since middle of November?
Nope.
Man, so it's been 6 weeks? You haven't hunted in 6 weeks?
Correct.
Man, we got to figure out some way to get you a little more flexibility in the job or something so you can get in the woods.
Well, I used all of my vacation for that 2 weeks vacation, and when I could have gone out and done some hunting here, but I didn't want to use my Iowa AnySex tag, which is basically your buck tag. And the county that I actually live in is different than the county that I spend most of my time hunting in. So when I went to go buy my tags this year, the county that I live in is completely sold out of doe tags because Iowa cut back on the number of doe tags this year.
Gotcha.
And I couldn't hunt in the county hunt does in the county that I live in. So there's that.
Well, now that being said, going into this coming weekend, are you going to take a doe? I know we talked 2 or 3 weeks ago about what you were thinking about doing, and now that we're there, what are you planning on shooting? First deer you see, first doe you see, or are you going to still hold out for an older deer? Where are you at with that?
If it's a doe, it's going to get something thrown at it. But like I was talking to my buddy about this the other day, I think I'm going to, if it's a spike buck, I'll probably shoot it. But if it's anything older than that and it's got some kind of growth, like an 8-pointer, a small 10, if it's a 3-year-old, like as far as my management standards, those won't change unless it's a spike.
I guess I don't understand why would you shoot a spike if you wouldn't shoot a small 8-pointer?
I don't know. Maybe because I don't see its potential yet. I don't know. It doesn't, I can't explain it.
So for whatever it's worth, those spikes, they aren't necessarily genetically inferior.
No, I understand that. But to me, I can't tell the future. So, if a 8-point walks by or a 10-point 2-year-old, and you see what he looks like, and you can imagine what he's going to look like in 10, or in 2-3 more years, that's harder for me as opposed to a spike who, yes, he will grow into a bigger antlered deer, but right now he's not. So I can't. Is he going to be an 8? Is he going to be a 10? Who knows? So I guess what it comes down to is I'm a bit of a hypocrite on on that judgment. But I don't know. Hopefully one doesn't walk by and I shoot 3 does.
Well, yeah, that would be a good way to get meat in the freezer. That's for sure.
I don't know. And like I've talked to you about this, we discussed this topic a bit earlier in the season, but it's like it's almost like I'm changing as a hunter, and yeah, I want to have a high, really good do really good management as far as age structure of bucks, but I also want to kill things. And if you're watching every doe and young buck walk by, and then it gets to what happened this year and last year, your hunting time is limited, and you're passing all these deer in hopes of a shooter 4-year-old or older buck walks by, and then you're sitting in the last day of the season and no deer are walking by you and no mature bucks are walking by you, and then you're eating tag soup. So in the past, since 2006, when I picked up my bow, and really seriously started hunting hard. And what I mean by that is, you know, your 2 week vacations, your every weekend, you're, you know, checking trail cameras on a regular basis. I've only shot 3 bucks. I've used my buck tag only 3 times in the past, 8 years. So, and then I've only shot one, two, three, four, maybe 5 does. So that's not a lot considering the amount of time I spent in the woods and for 2 or 3 years in a row, I was skunked on my buck tag. So I don't know. It's just, I guess it's a mind game with me right now. And I know that when the season starts next year, I'll be gun ho about management again. And I'm not going to shoot anything unless it's, what I deem a shooter. I don't know. I'm going crazy.
Well, hey, I understand. And that's kind of what we're talking about. The whole, larger topic for today, I think relates a lot to what we're already talking about right now, which is reflecting back on this season and then looking forward to the next season. And this is a lot of things that I tend to do this time of year too, is start, having these kind of internal conversations with myself about, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? What do I wish I'd done? What's going to be different next year? So that's kind of what I wanted to do here today. It's kind of just jumping on one last thing you said there, though, Dan. You mentioned that you've only, killed 3 bucks in the last 8 years, and then we've been talking about how maybe you want to change your standards and what you want to start killing things. You do have some pretty high standards,
right? And I know that.
So maybe it's not necessarily a drop where you will shoot the first deer you see, but maybe you could start, being open to shoot 3.5-year-olds instead of just waiting for the 4 or 5-year-olds or something like that. And that might be able to, still be a challenge enough for you, still be, a positive management choice to a degree, but also still provide the challenge maybe you're looking for too. I don't know if you start thinking about like more incremental shifts in that at all.
See, this is where it gets hard for me. I was in a tree the last day of my Iowa hunt in 2011. And I passed roughly 145, maybe 150 class 8-pointer. And he was probably a 4-year-old. And everybody gave me crap for passing that deer. Like, you should have shot him. He was a giant, whatever. The next year, he turns into probably a 170, 175, like a non-typical 10. And so that is a direct result of what, passing a deer at, when they're 3 years old in my area and watching them completely blow up into a booner. So that shooting a 3-year-old is going to be very hard for me, knowing that where I hunt, they have probably 2 more years until they have the potential to be big. So, and it may just be, hey, I need to stop passing so many does and just smoke some does and get that, I don't know, that blood, get that, that kill under my belt and get that urge satisfied, so to speak.
Interesting. Okay.
I don't know, man. Like, I have these dilemmas going off in my head, and it's weird, but it's like a tug of war, and it's like I'm pulling against a brick wall. I don't know.
Yeah, well, you've got plenty of time here in the coming months to kind of sort through that, I suppose, right?
Exactly, and it'll work itself out, and I'll be right back at the same place I am at the beginning of next season.
Fair enough. Well, let's take a step back now and focus on the past season, before we talk too much more about next year, and maybe start. I've been thinking the past couple of days, just kind of reliving some moments in my head. Some of the high points of the past season is, it's so crazy that we've been doing this since I think March or April, and there's such a build up to the season, and as we talked about it before, and then all of a sudden it's gone, and here we are, and we're already looking back at the 2014 season. It's kind of crazy. I feel like we just started talking about our plans for the early season, but here we are, it's done. Yep. But I'm curious, Dan, what do you think has been your greatest, maybe, and define greatest however you want, but what do you think's been your greatest moment of this 2014 season? What was your high point?
Well, just like every past 5 years, for me, obviously getting out in the woods, seeing nature, seeing these deer interact with each other and their surroundings. But man, when my buddy Ryan comes to town, we have an absolute blast. We hunt our asses off, but just the time, like, I don't know, it sounds kind of cheesy and guys typically don't talk like this, but the brotherhood, you know what I mean? The hanging out with someone who shares the same passion as you do, and you know, kind of feeding off his excitement, because I know he was excited for this year. So I don't know, the anticipation is almost just as good as the hunting itself. You know, checking all these trail cameras and seeing all these giant deer show up, it just gets you so fired up for the season. And then, you know, this year was all about Ryan. So getting to share in his excitement and watch one of his dreams come true, even though he didn't harvest anything, you know, he had a shot at an animal that a lot of hunters in their lifetime are not going to be able to have. So that was kind of a combination of great moments that were all wrapped into this one season.
Yeah, that's awesome. I can totally relate to the anticipation factor. Like, that is such a huge thing, especially for us that are you know, so serious about deer hunting that we're doing something related to it almost the entire year. You know, it's 9 months of work and build up and hype and anticipation and dreaming, all leading up to then these final, you know, 3 months or so where we're actually hunting. But that build up itself is a lot of fun. Like you said, the trail camera pictures and, or, you know, taking trips down your hunting property and doing work and stuff, all those different things are great moments too, that because you're so excited, there's so much hope and there's so much, you don't know what's going to happen during the season. And that's a pretty exciting thing. That's one of my favorite parts of the whole deer hunting year, I think, is just before the season.
Yep.
Yeah, I can, funny thing is I'm already getting excited about the next year, thinking about, you know, what deer might be there and who I might be hunting and what might be going on. I mean, that's half the fun right there.
That's a fact. Now, I was looking at the show notes today, and I don't know if you're on a certain path here, what we wanted to do today, but the first thing that popped into my head that I wanted to ask you a question was Jawbreaker. You know, we can't regret the past because we can't change it. We can't go back. But is there something that you would have done different in your pursuit for him, or the shot, or anything? I know you think about it every day, and I just would love to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah. For some reason, I didn't see this coming, so I got to think about it for a second.
I'm sorry.
No, but and also, don't let me forget, I still want to share with you my greatest moment of the season, because it's something you haven't heard about yet. So make sure to ask me about that later.
I will. Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. So Jawbreaker. Yeah, it's a weird thing. Because to your point, I do think about that a lot. And for anyone new to the show, I won't go into much, but it's a buck I've been hunting for 2 years. I got a shot at him. I wasn't able to recover him. And it was a whole debacle. So I've thought through it a lot, and I thought to myself, you know, what can I take away from it? And one part of me says, I wish it never happened at all. I wish I had not had that encounter. I wish I hadn't got a shot at him, because I would not have wanted to wound that deer and have whatever happened to him, which I still don't know. I would have rather, you know, me never shot him and hit him and wounded him and not be able to recover him, all those things. At least from the perspective of not wanting to wound a deer and you know, not be able to recover that animal. But then I also, you know, as time has gone by, I also think back about, you know, what I've been able to take from that experience, and what I've been able to learn from that, and how that's changed my perspective on some things, or how I go about some things when it comes to hunting. And, you know, now that 2 months has gone by, or more than 2.5 months now, I can in some way look back and say, hey, you know what, you did a lot of things right. for the longest time after that, I was just so upset with myself with how it ended. But now I can kind of look back to a small degree. Again, I wish I could take back that arrow so that deer didn't have to be wounded and possibly suffer. I'm not sure what happened. But I've also looked back and said, hey, you trusted a gut instinct. You looked at a whole bunch of different puzzle pieces. You put them together and you put yourself in the right place based on your intuition and all those different pieces together. And you put yourself in the position to take a shot at a 6.5-year-old deer. And I had that shot, and it was pretty incredible to be able to do that. Something that the specific deer I was after, in the specific way I was after him, and I was able to put myself in that opportunity. So now 2.5 months later, I can see, hey, that was a positive step there. So, I'm looking at what I did from that perspective to get up to that point and said, okay, you did some things right there. And I've been able to look back at that and take some satisfaction from the fact that I was able to do some of those things right. And I can, now take a little bit of solace in saying, hey, that was a step forward in some ways for me to get in that opportunity, right? But then looking at the final moments when, the shot, the only thing that went wrong was the shot, right? And we talked about this a little bit, in that full episode where we talked about the shot and the whole jawbreaker issue. And, two things for me, we talked about some of these specific things, and they're still probably true today. The biggest thing for me is I'm not going to put the camera first when it comes to getting a shot at a deer. In that situation, the biggest thing, I feel quite sure that if I wasn't messing around with that camera for 15 seconds or whatever it was, trying to self-film this deer, I would have had all the time in the world I needed to get a clear, wide-open, perfect shot at jawbreaker that I should have been able to. It would have been chip shot. And we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. Right. So that's step number one. I still haven't decided what I'm going to do filming wise in the future. If I'm going to continue to self-film, or if I'm going to get a cameraman, or if we're going to change kind of our priorities at Wired to Hunt when it comes to video in general. Those are some decisions I'm in the process of making right now. But if I am going to continue to self-film, it won't be the first priority. I tell my story, right? Telling the story of my season and my experiences deer hunting, that's my job. So I need to be able to tell these stories, and part of the way to tell that story is through video. But I also have avenues such as writing and this podcast. I have other ways to tell that story. And so in the end, my ultimate responsibility is to, number one, hunt as ethically, humanely, and responsibly as possible. That should be my very first responsibility. So if I'm going to take a shot at a deer, I realize that needs to be the first and most important thing I'm thinking about. Secondly, though, I do have an obligation to be able to share that story, since this is my job. And for a while there, I felt like it was my obligation. I had to get the shot on film. And previous years, I've gotten some shots at deer, and I didn't get on film, and I got all sorts of heck from people saying, "What's the point of even putting out a video without the kill shot? Why the heck? Why do I even watch this video?" And I've now decided, what? It is what it is. I'm not Michael Waddell. I'm not Jim Shockey. I'm not going to, be able to put out professional videos, and that's not my number one thing, because my sole obligation isn't to produce a TV show. I'm trying to have experiences and share those experiences with other people, and I have different ways I can share that experience. So I might not have video of the shots or video of some of these experiences, but I can tell the story. I can write the story. And so from a career obligation standpoint, I'm going to have to, say video is just not going to be that important, considering the fact I can share in other ways. So there's a couple things there with the whole video side of things. The final thing that I still struggle with is I still, in this case, there was a whole bunch of compounding variables that led to this, but I still rush shots sometimes. I wish I could be better at just settling in and then taking some extra seconds just to take some time and take stock of the situation. I just don't do that. I work on things. I try to get better at that. I have gotten better to a degree, but I'm still not as great as I wish I would be. And I know that gets better with time, and the more experience I have, the better I'll get with that. I've been hunting for 27, 28 years now. Well, not that much, I guess, but 20 some. But still, I get buck fever. I still get caught up in the moment. I still get pretty excited. So I just need to continue to get better, because in this case, the camera, I was messing around with the camera for 15 seconds or whatever it was. By the time I finally got the camera situated, I had to turn around, I had to grab the bow, I drew back, the peep sight didn't open, all these things happened. The deer was all the way on the other side of the clearing, and I basically, it was, you get a shot now, it's now or never, basically. And I, in the moment, I said, now, I'm going to take the shot, and this is looks like my best possible shot. In retrospect, if I had drawn and then taken a few seconds to think more about it, I might have seen that there was, this small branch in the way, or I might have just said, you know what, it's too close for comfort. It's too likely that something could go wrong here. He's halfway behind these branches. It's better not to take the shot and not risk wounding the deer. In the moment, I didn't think about that. So I wish I had, because actually, I went back to that tree stand now and sat looking, and actually where I thought that this was my last possible chance, if I'd had let him go and walk another 10 or 15 yards, he probably would have gone into another small shooting lane. So I actually probably would have had another chance. But at the time, I didn't realize it. So, hindsight's 20/20. I did the best I could in the moment, and it didn't go the way I would have wanted, but I did some things right leading up to it that I can look back at now and say, hey, you did some stuff there. And then I've also did some things I wish I hadn't, and I've been able to learn from that. And because that was such a defining moment of my season, that whole situation, it really defined this year for me. And that was kind of my big trial and tribulation that I had to push through. And I hit a low point for sure as a hunter. I really grew in some different ways. And so I'm fortunate I'm happy for that. I'm appreciative of that now, that I had to go through that, and that I am kind of who I am now as a hunter. And now I just need to go and take those lessons and move forward with them and apply them in future seasons. So I don't know. That's probably a long way to answer that question.
No, but the good thing you said in there is, and this is what I feel is the most important when it comes to hunting and pretty much life in general, but learning. If you can't learn from a scenario, then you've wasted your time. That's my opinion. So if you can take away something from that failure and turn it into a learning experience, then you actually became a better hunter out of that. Even though you didn't have a dead deer at the end of a blood trail, you became a better hunter.
Yeah, and I definitely think that was the case. And then I applied, some of the things that I, just talked about right there. I made sure to fix those wrongs the next time I had a chance at a deer, which was, 2 weeks later on the other Ohio buck that I, center punched, got a really good shot on him, because I was thinking about Jawbreaker just before that shot. Like, in my head, my thing after the whole thing with Jawbreaker was, when I'm working on a shot, just recite Jawbreaker as my little mantra. And that kind of reminds me, hey, slow down, focus on your form, take a couple extra seconds. So as that deer was, stepping into range, I was kind of saying Jawbreaker in my head, just remind you, don't let that happen again. Don't rush it. And I didn't, and it paid off. So that was definitely, the whole Ohio season for me was definitely the defining period of my 2014 season, and definitely my biggest learning experiences. From A to B, or from A to Z, really, that was what my season comes down to. Even though I spent a lot more time in Michigan and Indiana and stuff, a lot of that was kind of negligible compared to what all happened in Ohio. So,
good deal.
So yeah.
Now we got to talk about, because I so rudely interrupted, your greatest moment from the past year.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm talking a whole long time here, so I apologize for that, because I just rambled there talking about Jawbreaker like I always do. But so my greatest moment of my season, you haven't even heard this story yet, Dan. And it's kind of part 1A and 1B. 1B would be, my Ohio, the ending of my Ohio season, that whole thing, and we've already talked that whole story, so I won't repeat it. But I was able to, kill a nice buck in Ohio, and I actually, the whole story. I thought it was Jawbreaker, and that whole that was a pretty incredible moment to still be able to complete that season in a way that I was pretty excited about. But the best moment of my season came about a week and a half ago, when my dad came down to hunt with me. And my dad has some eyesight issues. Doesn't have the best eyesight since he was a child, and because of that, it's been a harder time for him hunting. He's still always going out hunting, but he just doesn't see as many deer as most people. A lot of times there'll be deer out there, and he might not be able to see it. But he's just an incredibly impressive person, I guess, that what he's been able to do over the course of his life, despite those challenges. But that being said, he hasn't killed a deer in a long time because of that. So we actually hunted when I was a young kid. Growing up, I would always sit with my dad, and he'd be the one with the gun, and he'd be out there hunting, and I'd be watching him, and we were never able to kill a deer together. Well, he was never able to shoot a deer while I was out there with him. So I thought it'd be fun. He was down here hunting with me. I would sit with him while he was hunting, but this time, he'd be the one with the gun. I'd be the one just sitting watching, but I'd be the one setting him up to hunt. So I took him to one of my best spots here in Michigan, and I had a redneck blind that I have set up here that's really a perfect setup for him because he's not really comfortable up in a tree stand, and it wouldn't be really great for two of us up there anyway. So we got to hunt a couple days together, and he was the first night we hunted together. We saw a few deer, but they were too far away. Second morning, we saw some more does, but nothing quite in range. And it gets to our last evening, and we're sitting in the box blind together and hadn't seen anything. And I just remember just thinking, sitting there with my dad, and I just thought back to all the times, when I was a little kid hunting with him and thinking back on stories. So I started asking my dad about his favorite times hunting with his dad. So for like an hour, he was just telling me different stories of when he was 6 or 7 hunting with his dad and all those great memories. And then we started talking about, what were our favorite memories when, me and my dad were hunting. And we kind of joked about, the different times, and he mentioned the fact, wow, I never was able to shoot a deer with you, and he was kind of like, it's kind of a bummer. So we kind of joked about that, and I think he kind of lamented it a little bit too, that we had never been able to share that experience. Well, then just as we're kind of talking about that, all of a sudden, like, Dad, there's a buck, and coming out of the tall grass off to my right comes a buck. The buck steps out in the food plot, and we kind of talked this whole thing. So as that buck steps out in the food plot, I grab the glass windows and I stand up really slowly and slowly creak the window up and latch up top. And I sit back down. My dad's grabbing his muzzleloader and he sets it on the windowsill. And I'm like, Dad, you want to take him? He's like, yeah, I want to take him. So I looked over at my dad, and you can see him. He's pretty excited. And I grab my binoculars and put them on the deer and wait a second, 2 seconds. Boom, that gun went off, and the buck took off out of the field, and I got to look at my dad for the first time in my life and give him a huge high five and a hug and say congratulations. Like, it was the first time for the two of us ever to be together and have someone shoot a deer, and it was just the coolest thing. We just, was so exciting, and it was just really cool. Kind of reversed roles, right? My dad taught me how to hunt and took me out in the outdoors and all this, and now I was able to take him out to my spot and help him shoot a deer, and to get to see him have that success and me be a part of that. That was just the coolest thing. And so, the shot went off, and the deer actually dropped at the shot for about 5 seconds, kicking, and they jumped up and then took off running. So we weren't sure exactly how good the hit was. It looked to me like it might have been just a touch back. So we decided to back out, wait a little bit. So we waited till after dark, and my buddy Andy, who has his tracking dog, came out to help us. And long story short, we went and tracked the deer, and we had very, very little blood. Just a couple little drops. Here we go, like 50 yards without blood, 100 yards without blood. But Junebug, the dog, was really on it. So my dad was waiting at the spot where we had last seen blood, and me and Andy were up with the dog maybe 60, 70 yards ahead. And we've been tracking for maybe an hour now. I don't know, something like that. It's late after dark. And we get up to here, and Andy goes, oh, man, here's a pile of corn in the blood. He must have got a gut shot. And I was like, oh, crap. And I walk up there, and I see that actually the buck's laying right there. So I was really excited. But then we're like, hey, Dad, come over here. There's some blood, but man, there's corn in it. This is definitely a gut shot. Man, sorry, Dave. And so Dad comes up, and he's huffing and puffing and upset and frustrated. He's like, son of a gun, I can't believe this. He was so upset. And he comes walking up, and we're both standing right next to the deer, and he comes walking up, and you see him he gets there, and he looks down at the blood with corn in it, and it just took him like 2 or 3 seconds just staring at it before it like processed. He was like, "Oh my gosh." And so we just laughed, and we hugged, and we high-fived, and it was just really, really cool. It was awesome. Highlight of my season, highlight of definitely one of the greatest highlights of my hunting career ever. It was a pretty awesome moment.
Yeah, man, I can't wait until I am able to share. My son's not even born yet, and I can't wait to share a moment like that with him someday.
Yeah, I think when it all comes down to it, that's what it's all about.
Exactly.
So that was pretty cool. So what I want to jump back to you real quick here on something you just asked me about, which was, my debacle with Jawbreaker. What did I learn from that? That was probably, for me, that was the biggest mistake of the year, that whole situation. But for you, what do you think was either your biggest mistake or your biggest learning experience from 2014? Maybe it's something that happened during the season, or maybe it's something that happened before the season.
Well, as you know, me and Ryan put a ton of time in preseason to hanging stands and doing our scouting and going over, a high-level game plan for the properties that we could hunt. And I tell you what, and we talked about this, about setting up observation stands and then setting back, watching the area and waiting for the right time to do that. 50% of the time, maybe even more, 75% of the time that we did that this year, it worked, and it worked to a T. Just what me and Ryan said all year long was, we're in the right place, but the wrong deer are coming through. And what I mean by that is all that planning, preparation. We get to that location. The trail cameras are showing the big bucks are there. The movement, the younger deers, the does. It's just that one buck in that area is not coming through. And there's two things I would consider that we may have done wrong, or and the lesson that could possibly be learned is, I think a lot of people are afraid to just make that jump and commit to that next stand location. We were in our observation stands. We were, seeing the movement, and maybe we waited one extra hunt and waited to get in there. But man, I think there's a couple instances that, I don't know, that came to my mind where we were back from the area. We were back from the pinch point where they were coming out. And for a day, 2 days in a row, we were seeing all these deer pile out of here. And we looked at each other and said, man, it's just a matter of time until the big boy steps out. So instead of us waiting, or, instead of us going in there and, from an opposite wind direction and waiting for the perfect wind direction, we sat back, and then that night we watched the big buck come out. And we should have been in that finger of timber when he came out, and not waited for us to see him from the observation stand, because we already had the facts there that the deer were piling out of this finger. And I really think that we weren't aggressive enough to jump into this finger when all the movement was there. I think we just waited one extra day, and it's almost like, yeah, like I said, we weren't aggressive enough.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we talked a little bit about this, I think, during our rut episode, but I'm right in the same boat as you. I think if anything I took away, other than the stuff related to what we already talked about, from a purely tactic standpoint, that's exactly my big takeaway for this year too, was, getting more aggressive and being willing to, when you've got the facts, when things are ready, go in there. I tend to pussyfoot around because I'm so concerned about not putting too much pressure on the deer, which is important, right? You need to balance that, but sometimes you have to strike, and you have to strike at the right time in the right place. And too often I've been just a little bit off because I'm waiting, or I'm You don't want to push in too far. But I found, just like what you said, there are those opportunities when you should go in there. And this year, when I did get aggressive, I got my 2 shots at bucks. I got the shot Jawbreaker, and then the next time I decided to push in, set up a stand at 4 a.m. in the spot I had to be because I knew I had to get in there deep. Well, I killed my buck. So that again, I think illustrated that, when the things are lined up correctly and if you have that confidence, you need to go in there, because these big mature deer, they don't operate like the rest of the deer herd. They're not going to be willy-nilly out in the middle of the fields as often. Sometimes you have to jump on those opportunities when you have them, and sometimes it's in the harder to get spots too.
Right. And that's my biggest problem is I overanalyze everything. And instead of saying, all right, I'm hunting here tonight, I analyze it. I analyze everything. I analyze, opposing stand locations to where maybe this one would be better, maybe this one would be better, when I just need to commit. And that's a problem that I've been working on, and it just seems like it's hard for me to fix that problem that I have with myself.
Yeah. Now, one thing we mentioned earlier this year, something you mentioned when talking about this for next year, you said you might even consider not hanging any stands at all. Instead,
Right.
just using a portable, so that every time you go out, you can pick whatever the best spot is for that night, and not feel like you are obligated to sit any pre-hung stands. Is that something you still think you want to do next year?
Yeah, most definitely. Because here is the exact reasons why, and I think we talked about this on one of the podcasts already, but go out there and trim stands early, and your July and your August or whatever, and trim those stand locations out, but don't leave any stands in it. Because then what I found myself in this year was I have a stand in a location in an area, and I needed to be 40 yards away, or 20 yards this way, or 30 yards this way, or 40 yards, whatever. And then you're almost committed to that area when, all I have are lone wolf tree stands and sticks. Okay. So they're easy to put on my back, and I can go in and do a run and gun setup fairly easy. And I've done enough times where it doesn't take that long. The only problem is, getting in there quietly, trimming out shooting lanes. So I have to get in earlier. But I'm used to that because that's just the way I hunt. But if I can go into these certain spots, cut out a couple shooting lanes, and then have a starting place, tear down that set, and then make my minor adjustments from that location, I really think that's going to help me get closer to the deer. You have to be mobile every time. It just comes back to that for me.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense to hunt like that in your type of situation, but a lot of work too.
Yep, it is. And it's something that has an expiration date, because, when I hit my 50s, depending on how good a shape I am in, when I hit those older ages, it's not going to be able to be done. And as I'm going to hunt like that, and hard as I can until I can't do it anymore. And that's just the way. And my belief is that's how it has to be for me to get closer to these big deer, with the scenario that I have, the added pressure from other hunters, the change of the crops when they introduce the livestock into the fields. It's, all those things are in a way a pattern, and I have to put all these pieces of the puzzle together to find out what the best possible location for that is. And it's different every year. So I can't have a permanent stand, and it's different every day.
Right. You got a pretty dynamic situation there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something that I got popped up in my head here while we're talking about this is, it doesn't seem directly related to what you just said, but it made me think of this. One of the other big things, kind of one of the mistakes I made this year, and one of the big things I want to do different next year, in addition to being more aggressive, is land, getting more access. One of the biggest mistakes I made this year, Dan, I don't know if we've ever really talked about it, but I got comfortable with my land situation. So I have my property down in Ohio. which is a great spot. I have my couple spots in Michigan. I've had more spots in Michigan. I've lost a few spots, but I've got a couple here that are okay. And then at the beginning of the year, I was originally going to hunt in Iowa, and then I changed and said, no, I'm going to hunt in Indiana. So then I went into the summer saying, okay, I'm going to go out there, knock on a bunch of doors, get permission on a couple good spots in Indiana. So I went down there several times, scouting, kind of checking out fields and seeing what kind of deer were where. And I eventually in July found an area with some nice bucks in the general area. Spent a night out there knocking on doors. I had knocked on like 8 or 9 different doors, and I got kind of sort of permission on the spot. But after that, I thought, okay, I'm upset. I'll stick with that spot. Well, that spot ends up falling through, but then I've got another friend who says, hey, I live in Indiana. I can get you permission on a couple spots. So he calls me one night and says, hey, I got permission for 2 or 3 farms for you. I'll send you the address information, shortly. Well, he's kind of a friend of a friend, not someone I know really well. Well, I never heard back from him again. So, but because of that, we're having that conversation like in August or something. I decided I wasn't going to go knock on any more doors or try to get any more properties. I was like, well, I got that. That'll come through. So September comes, right? We have the elk hunt. I was out here and there, and October arrives, and now this guy has not gotten back to me, has got me no information about this property, so I now don't have anywhere to hunt in Indiana, and it's October, and I was, banking on having that spot. So now I'm just stuck with Ohio and Michigan. Well, Michigan ends up being a complete flop, as you know. I've had no mature bucks in the area at all, except for one who wasn't even that exciting of a deer to hunt. But in general, my properties in Michigan were total busts compared to how they are most years. So Michigan, essentially, as we got into October, became somewhere I wasn't really even that interested in hunting anymore for this season. So now I've just had Ohio pretty much. And I dropped the ball because I hadn't followed through on the Indiana situation and gotten permission on additional places and kept knocking on doors, and now I was stuck with nowhere to go. So, as you know, I was able to get some last-minute permission on a property in Indiana, and I got to hunt down there, but I'd never been down there. I knew nothing about it. I just showed up and tried to figure some stuff out, and there was other people hunting it and a whole bunch of other things, and it obviously didn't work out at all. So, that's something I learned is I just need to, this coming year, you can never have access to too many spots. So I'm going to just tirelessly go out there and get more spots in Michigan, get spots in some other states. For me, I've kind of realized I need permission. I need to have 2 out-of-state spots for me. Michigan is just not dependable enough, at least where I can hunt, that I know there's going to be enough mature deer for me to hunt to make it worth a whole lifetime for me. So I need to have 2 out-of-state places that I can be bouncing back and forth from throughout the year to keep me busy and in the deer that I'm interested in hunting. And I just wasn't prepared for that this year. So that's a big thing for me next year is I'm not going to get into that situation again where I'm, stuck with a field tag in Ohio and nowhere else that I'm really excited about hunting.
Right. And that time of year starts as soon as the season's over.
Yeah.
Because shed hunting a property is the key, in my opinion, to accessing it for hunting season, because a majority of people will let you go in and shed hunt and look for antlers because not a lot of other people do it. And you get to know the farmer through that, then they're more acceptable to letting you to come in and bow hunt or whatever kind of hunting you want to do. And even hunting that property for a turkey hunt. And because more people deer hunt than turkey hunt, and in my area anyway, and I just know that any chance you can get to prove yourself as a good person to these landowners, they're gonna let you jump in with let's say the other hunters that are in this area, on their farms.
Yeah, that is such a great piece of advice, and something that's worked for me and some of my friends too, is exactly get your foot in the door with something that's not quite as competitive. People aren't quite as worried about you going out there in February to look for antlers, and it's a great way to build that relationship.
And I think we had a podcast almost dedicated to getting permission.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you should post that as a link on the show notes here, and you guys should take a listen to that because a lot of good information is covered in that podcast as well.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. We'll do that because it's such an important thing. I mean, really all these things we've talked about when it comes to being aggressive or different tactics, none of that matters if the deer that you're interested, the kind of deer that you're interested in hunting, don't live there.
Right.
So you got to have the land. You have to be in the right spots to even be in the game. So big takeaway there for me. So we are getting here pretty close to time, Dan. I would say, well, I'm curious for you, Dan, if there was anything, right, we've talked about some of our high moments, some of our low moments from the year, some things we want to do differently. For me, I start setting new goals for the next season about this time. And I start challenging myself in new ways too, different ways that I want to push myself and do some things different. So we've talked about some of those to this point. But I'm curious, is there anything that you would challenge our listeners to do next year? Because everyone listening to this, I'm sure some of you guys out there can relate to some of the things me and Dan are talking about. But we definitely want to push you guys to get better too, just as we're trying to push ourselves to grow as hunters. So Dan, is there anything that you can think of that would be worth to kind of challenge our listeners with?
Oh yeah. And it's hard to do because I still find myself getting complacent in my old ways as well, especially when you're exhausted. And hunting is supposed to be this relaxing time to enjoy nature and all that stuff. But if your goals if you have high goals, there's only one way to do that. And I guess my challenge would be, don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to go into an area that you think a big old mature buck is living and fail, get winded and get blown out of there. Because the only way you're going to get that mature buck is by going in there and potentially risking that. Because it's a coin toss, or it's a crapshoot, whatever way you want to think about it. In order to get to these big mature animals, you have to go to where they live, not see them, but be able to shoot them. For bow hunting, you got to be close. So my challenge is to make a move. Period.
I love it. I love the idea of don't be afraid to fail, because that's something over the years I've been so. That's one of my big issues is I'm always afraid of screwing it up. So I won't risk the aggressive move because I'm more concerned about screwing it up versus, being confident in my ability to possibly pull it off. But I think
that's a human flaw.
Yeah.
I mean, just imagine if it's like when you see a hot girl at a bar, and you're like, I'm married now, so I can't do any of that stuff. But you see a hot girl at the bar, you want to talk to her, but you don't got the balls to. This is easier because, you're not going to get rejected by a whitetail. Yeah, they'll blow and run away, whatever, but there's no humility there. None of your friends get to see that.
No, but it's funny though, that's what used to happen to me at the bar too.
They'd blow and run away?
Well, they'd make weird noises or something like that.
Man, what kind of girls were you going after?
Oh, man. I don't think I meant it quite the way it sounded after I said it. But sorry, moving on. No, I think that's some really good advice.
Go big or go home.
Yeah. And, even those times when you do screw it up, you push in there and you spook the buck, you learn something from that because you saw, yeah, I was right. He was in here. Or, the assumptions I had about how this deer was operating, yes, I can now confirm it. And those confirmations, those sightings, even though you spooked him and maybe you don't get to kill him this year, you've just added a really important piece of the puzzle to your knowledge bank that you can apply for 20, 30 years in the future because you learned something important about that deer and how mature deer operate. So I think it's really important. We talk about this all the time, but really looking at those situations where you quote unquote fail and finding what you can learn from that.
And I fail every day, or every time I'm out in the woods. There's you very rarely have the perfect hunt. If you kill the deer you're after in that sit on that day, that's the perfect hunt. But you don't kill a big deer or a deer you're going after every time you step into the woods. No. So you got to lose sometimes.
Yeah, that's why they call it hunting and not shooting.
Fact.
Yep. Well, I think we could probably keep talking about different things along these lines for
Is
another
this
whole
going to
show.
be the first ever end of the year 2-hour episode?
It could be, but I'm going to cut it off because we could talk for 2 hours. But this is going to be our first 1 hour end of the year episode for 2014, and we'll be in 2015 here soon. So
Real quick.
yeah,
I got to know this one because it's on the show notes. Funniest moment or embarrassing moment in the past year? Give it to me straight, as short as you can.
oh gosh, that's the issue. Is I wrote that and then I totally can't think of my moment now.
You put a little note there, GP. What's that mean?
So that was my fallback story. If you tried to ask this one, I thought of a funny story that me and my dad had talked about while we were hunting from a past year. I can tell you that funny story if you still want, but I know there's some dumb stuff I did this year. I just can't remember it off the top of my head.
Gotcha.
But
was it how you were conceived?
That's no, I'm not going to tell that story. But unfortunately, I do know a little bit about that. I don't really want to know. But do you have one? I don't have a good one. Tell you the truth.
I got a good one.
Let's hear yours because it'll be fun.
So I was regular this year. And when I mean regular, I mean I had to go at the same time almost every day. Number 2, you know what I mean? Uh-huh. And I broke a personal record this year. Most poops from a tree stand without getting down. So, and that's as a cameraman.
Oh my gosh.
So Ryan had to witness. I guess he didn't watch me do it. He had his back turned. He could have peeked.
Dude,
but
that poor guy.
But yeah, I dropped deuce from 20 feet.
That's pretty incredible. So that brings up a funny story that didn't happen to me, but one of my good buddies that I hunt with. So we're up north at my family hunting camp, and he'll probably kill me for telling this story. But he's out there sitting out in the middle of the woods, way back in the deep woods of northern Michigan, and we drink this really stiff, nasty coffee, black coffee in the morning before we go out hunting. So obviously that gets your digestive tract moving. So he's out there sitting way back in the woods, and he gets that feeling. He's like, oh, man, I got to go. And he goes rummaging through his pack, and he realizes he forgot his TP. So in his panic, and this was like a serious situation, in his panic, he had to rip off all of his boxers except for like a little loincloth just covering a little bit and just the elastic band around the front to take care of it. And then he comes walking in, a couple hours later in the camp, and he's got this funny look on his face. I'm like, what are you smirking about? And he just kind of pulls up his shirt and just shows just all he has an elastic band hanging out over his hips. It was horrible.
Yeah, I had to take off one of my layers of socks, and my feet got cold. But poopy butt is not. I mean, cold feet is better than poopy butt.
Yeah, and I can't believe how do we get on this topic here? Like, how did this happen?
Hey, I told a funny story.
Yep. Well,
well, there goes the sponsors.
There goes everything. Okay. Really, there goes the whole show.
Well, it's been a great run here, guys. We'll never see you again.
Been a good year, but Dan started talking about wiping his butt with socks, and then we had to shut it down. Oh, geez. Well, I think this is a perfect way to end 2014.
We got some big things coming up, too, man. We talked about some of the next guests, and I know if you're a guy, you're gonna love the next guest. So there's that. That's all I'm gonna say.
We've got some good guests coming up.
Guests coming up.
We've got some exciting new things we're gonna try out with the podcast in the new year, and a lot of stuff. But before we start talking about the future podcasts, there's probably one thing that a lot of people are wondering about, which is our big giveaway, our Christmas giveaway that we announced on the last episode. We have 17 different winners, and we have picked those winners today. So, Dan, can I hear your best drum roll impression here before I start announcing our winners?
Well, I'm not going to give you a drum roll, but you're a Star Wars nerd, right?
Oh, yeah, I love Star Wars.
Okay, so how about this? Well, that's Superman, isn't it? Or is that?
That is not that's not Star Wars. That's Superman, I think. Yeah.
Oh well, that just tells you how much I know.
Yes.
Okay. Well, anyway, Superman.
You could have done like a dun 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 dun.
There we
dun,
go.
dun, dun.
There
Yeah,
we
that
go.
would have been it.
How about we just go like this?
Yeah, that's probably best. All right, perfect. Our 12 Wired to Hunt hat winners are, and I'm gonna butcher some of these names. 12 people winning hats: Reed Leeser, Brett Diffin, David Baldridge, Paul Symes, TJ Dennis, Joseph Zimmerman, Andrew Prosser, Sam Bates, Jason Rude, Jacob Pruitt, Josh Schaefer, and Chris Rogers. There's our 12 hat winners. So, and FYI, for all the winners, I'm going to send you all a Facebook message and get your address information, and we'll figure out how to send this stuff to you. So look for a note from me coming soon. Our next winner gets a 1-year subscription to HuntSoft, which is a really cool internet program. It allows you to put in all your trail camera images and analyze all the data. 1-year subscription. The winner is Kyle Spencer.
Big winner.
Big winner. Now we've got a dozen Carbon Express Mayhem Hunter arrows. Really nice arrows. Shot them for a couple of years. The winner of a dozen arrows from Carbon Express is Lindsay. This is Lindsay Zizelman, I think, or Zizelman, or Zizelman, maybe. Something like that. So, Lindsay, you are the big winner. Next up, we've got a Big and J prize package with some of the Big and J BB Squared and their new Mineral Meltdown product. Cool stuff there. The winner of the Big and J prize package is Chris Rogers. Chris Rogers. Yes, that's
Big
the one.
Winner.
Now we've got 2 final winners here. This last one here is for a Redneck T-post feeder. So this is a cool feeder for corn or some kind of attractant that you can hang on a tree or a T-post. The winner for the Redneck T-post feeder is Ruben Dort, or Dart. Ruben. And finally, last but not least, the winner of the Redneck Outdoors portable hunting chair, which my dad was sitting in when he killed his buck a week and a half ago. Not the one we're giving away, but a chair. The winner of a Redneck portable hunting chair is Jake Huff. Jake Huff.
Big winner.
So there it is. There's our winners. 17 of you guys will be getting some pretty cool prizes here in the mail as our thank you for sticking with us this year and enjoying the podcast with us for 37 episodes.
Well, and it just seems like we started this thing yesterday.
I know.
So as far as 2014 is concerned, I've had an absolute blast doing this. Thank you for letting me be a part of it, Mark. And I'm pretty excited for 2015.
Yeah. Hey, it's been incredible. I'm glad that you were able to join us for this, Dan. It's been awesome having a co-host. And I think most importantly, we've got to thank the listeners who have.
That's the big one.
They've really, stuck with us through all the crazy stuff we talk about and the weird words I say over and over again, and the stories and the interesting episodes and maybe the not as interesting episodes, and for giving us great feedback and advice and sharing your stories and just being a part of the Wired to Hunt Nation. Gosh, we appreciate it. And like Dan said, this has been an absolute blast. I never expected when we launched the podcast that it would have I had no idea it would be quite so well received. We've gotten such good feedback, and I just got an email the other day from someone who said, it's totally changed how they hunt, and it's changed their life. Now, they might have been exaggerating, but they said that in the email. So that's kind of cool. And I keep hearing from more and more people saying, hey, what I learned on the podcast has helped me so much, helped me get a deer. Someone just emailed me today, Dan, who said they wanted to send in their success story because our late season advice from our episodes helped them kill a late season buck. So
awesome.
It's awesome. Yeah. I love that we're able to help people, and, we're just going to keep on doing it, and we're going to keep doing our best, and we're going to keep on getting better. And I hope in 2015, this podcast is going to be awesome. So thank you everyone out there listening. As always, be sure to visit wiredtohunt.com/episode 37 For show notes and links from today's episode, we'll have some different links to things that we've talked about. Dan, I think you mentioned that one podcast episode. We'll make sure to link that.
Yep.
Also, a little update that I haven't mentioned before. Right now you can listen to the podcast on the website or on iTunes on your phone or tablet. Excuse me, I'm getting the hiccups here. But you can also now listen to the Wired Hunt podcast on an app called Stitcher. And Stitcher is available on Android phones. So right now, you can listen to the podcast on your podcast app if you have an iPhone. But now, if you download the Stitcher app, which is spelled Stitcher, Stitcher, you can get that in your app store. If you've got an Android phone, you can now get the podcast right in your phone or your tablet if you're an Android device user. So that should make things a lot easier for all of you out there that don't own Apple devices. Finally, we'd also like to thank our partners who help make this show possible, who have made this such a great year. If it weren't for our partners, couldn't do this. So big thank you to Sitka Gear, Trophy Ridge, Bear Archery, Redneck Blinds, Carbon Express Arrows, Huntsoft, Lacrosse Boots, Big & J Long Range Attractants, and the Whitetail Institute of North America. So that being said, and for all of you out there who are playing along, that means it's time to take a drink. This is our last show of the year. So again, thank you all so much. Happy New Year, God bless, and stay wired to hunt.